Hi, this is Rafael Aaron Legaspi, and I'll be discussing, or I'm gonna be giving, uh, a brief summary or a description, or rather, yeah, a brief summary of timeline of operating systems. And so we do have a lot of operating systems way back. Started from the 1950s up to the present. And most of these operating systems are we're not familiar about them, but I'll still be going through them through this video. So during the 1950s, we started with during 1951 we had Leo 1, Lions Electronic Office. It was a commercial development of EDSA computing platform supported by a British firm, J. Lyons and Company. So the Leo 1 was the first computer used for commercial business applications. And then during 1953, we have DISAC, an early machine capable of distributing computing. DISAC was the second standards electronic automatic computer. And then 1955, we have MIT's Tape Director operating system made for Whirlwind. MIT is a private research university in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And for Whirlwind, uh, I'm also not familiar with Whirlwind. So for 1955, we have General Motors operating system made for IBM 701. It is electronic data processing machine known as the defense calculator while in development. It's IBM's first commercial scientific computer. And 1956, we had GM-NAA IO input output system of General Motors and North American Aviation. Was the first operating system for the IBM 704. And then 1957, we had Atlas Supervisor and BESIS for Bell Labs for IBM 704 as well. And it, and then later on IBM 1790 and then IBM 1794. And then during 1958, we had University of Michigan Executive System, or also called UMES, for IBM 704, 709, and 7090. And then lastly, for 1959, we had Share Operating System, or SOS. It was based on the GM-NAA IO. And then 1960s, we started with IBSys. It's for the IBM for its 7090 and 7094. The IBSys is the discontinued tape-based operating system that IBM supplied with its IBM 7090 and IBM 7094 computers. And then 1961, we had CTS demonstration. It's MIT's compilable time sharing system for the IBM 1794. And then MCP MCP is the proprietary operating system of the Borough Small, Medium, and Large Systems, including the Unisys ClearPath MCP systems. And in 1962, we had Atlas Supervisor, and then BBN Time Sharing System. The BBN Time Sharing System was an early time sharing system created at Bolt, Beranek, and Newman for the PDP-1 computer. It began operation in September 1962. And then we also had GCOS, also known as General Comprehensive Operating System. It is a family of operating systems oriented toward the 36-bit GE Honeywell mainframe computers. And then 1963, we had AN FSQ-32. It was it was idea planned for military computer central for deployment to super combat centers in nuclear bunkers and to some above ground military installations. And then we also had CTSS. Um, it was one of the first time sharing operating systems. It was developed at the MIT Computation Center. CTSS was first demonstrated on MIT's IBM 709 in November 1961. And then JOS, or an acronym for JONIAC Open Shop System, was one of the very first interactive time-sharing programming languages. It pioneered a number of features that would become common in languages from the 1960s into the 1980s. And then Titan Supervisor was the prototype of the Atlas II computer developed by Ferranti and the University of Cambridge Mathematical Laboratory in Cambridge, England. It was designed starting in 1963 and in operation from 1964 to 1973. And then in 1964, we had the KDF-9 time sharing director. It early British computer designed and built by English Electric. The first came into service in around 1964, and the last of 29 machines was decommissioned in 1980 at the National Physical Laboratory. And then we also had Berkeley time sharing system. It was a pioneering time sharing system. It was a pioneering time sharing operating system implemented between 1964 and 1967 at the University of California. And then we also had Dartmouth time sharing system, an operating system that was first developed at Dartmouth College between 1963 and 1964. And then we also had OS 360, officially known as IBM System 360 operating system. It is a discontinued batch processing operating system developed by IBM for their then new System 360 mainframe computer. It was announced in 1964. And then we also had SCOPE, an acronym for Supervisory Control of Program Execution. It was the name used by the Control Data Corporation for a number of operating system projects in the 1960s. And then we also had TOPS-10 system. It's a discontinued operating system from Digital Equipment Corporation for the PDP-10 mainframe computer family. And we also had Exec-8. It is the operating system for the Unisys ClearPath Dorado family of mainframe systems. And then 1965, we had the multi-programming system, or the OS. It was a computer operating system designed by a team led by Edsger Dijkstra. I'm not sure if I was able to pronounce that correctly. Described in monographs in 1965 to 66 and published in 1968. And then we also had Multics. It is an influential early time-sharing operating system, which is based on the concept of a single-level memory. Virtually all modern operating systems were heavily influenced by Multics, often through Unix, which was created by some of the people who had worked on Multics either directly or not. And then Boss 360 was an early IBM system 360 operating system. And then TOS 360, it's also called this operating system 360, or also DOS, or simply DOS. It is a discontinued operating system for IBM mainframes. It was announced by IBM on the last day of 1964, and it was first delivered in June 1966. And then We also had TSOS, later called VMOS, an acronym for Time Sharing Operating System. It is a discontinued operating system for RCA mainframe computers of the Spectrum 70 series. And then we had PIC operating system. It is a demand page, multi-user virtual memory time sharing computer operating system based around the unique multi-value database. It is used primarily for business data processing. And then 1966, we had OS 360 again, and DOS 360, and then MS8 or the RL monitor system. It is a discontinued operating system developed for the Digital Equipment Corporation PDP-8 in 1966 by Richard F. Larry. Was submitted to DECUS in 1970. It was a disk-oriented system faster than its predecessor, the 4K disk monitor system. And then we also had George 1 and 2 for the ICT 1900 series. George was the name given to a series of operating systems released by International Computers and Tabulators, acronym for ICT, in the 1960s. It was intended for the ICT 1900 series of computers, as I mentioned earlier. It included George 1, George 2, George 3, and George 4. And then during 1967, we had CP-40. It was a research precursor to CP-67, which in turn was part of IBM's then revolutionary CP-67 CMS. It is a virtual machine, or rather virtual memory time sharing operating system for the IBM system. And then CP-67, it was the control program portion of the CP-CMS. Also a virtual machine operating system developed for the IBM System 360. And then we also had Michigan Terminal System. It's one of the first time-sharing computer operating systems developed in 1967 at the University of Michigan for use on IBM S360-67 and S370 and other compatible mainframe computers. We also had ITS, or acronym for Incompatible Time Sharing System. It is a time sharing operating system that developed principally by the MIT Artificial Intelligence Laboratory with help from Project Mac. We also had Orville. It is a time sharing monitor developed by Stanford University for IBM System 360. Then we also had TSS 360, the IBM time sharing system. Is a discontinued early time sharing operating system designed exclusively for a special model of the System 360 line of mainframes. Then we also had OS 360 MBT, and then Weights. It was a heavily modified variant of Digital Equipment Corporation's Monitor operating system for the PDP-6 and PDP-10 mainframe computers. It was used at the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Laboratory from the mid 1960s up until 1991. And then during 1968, we had the airline. Hold on, let me go to the next slide. So during the 1968, we had the Airline Control Program, or ACP. It is also a discontinued operating system developed by IBM beginning about 1965, in contrast to previous airline transaction processing systems. The most notable aspect of ACP is that it was designed to run on most models of the IBM 360 mainframe computers. And then we also had the multi-program system, or the OS. Was a computer operating system designed by a team. As I mentioned earlier, it was a team led by Edsger Dijkstra. And then we also had the TSS-8. It was, it's also a discontinued time sharing operating system co-written by Don Whitcraft and John Everett at Digital Equipment Corporation in 1967. And then during 1969, we had 10X Unix, if you later called Unix. So if you're gonna look at it, it still had, or it was spelled UNICS, and then later it became UNIX. And then we had RC4000 multi-programming system. We also had Multics. It is an influential early time-sharing operating system, which is based on the concept of a single-level memory. Virtually all modern operating systems were heavily influenced by Multics. And then George 3 for the ICL 1900 series. And then during the 1970s, we had the DOS-11. We also had the RTS-11. And then OS-8. And then 1972, we had the Data General RDOS or RDOS. It was a real-time operating system released in 1970. The software was only sold bundled with the company's popular Nova and Eclipse mini computers. We also had EDOS. It was an operating system based upon IBM's original mainframe DOS. The name stood for Extended Disk Operating System. And then we had operating system Virtual Storage 1, and then Virtual Storage 2, R1, and then Virtual Machine Facility 370, Virtual Machine Basic System Extensions Program Product, and Virtual Machine System Extensions Program Product, and then Music SP was developed at McGill University in the 1970s from an early IBM time-sharing system called RAX. We also had Primos. It is an operating system developed during the 1970s by Prime Computer for its mini computer systems. It rapidly gained popularity and by the mid-1980s was a serious contender as a mainline mini computer operating system. And then during the 1973, we had the Elbrus. It was intended for Soviet computer. It's a line of Soviet and Russian computer systems developed by Lebedev Institute of Precision Mechanics and Computer Engineering. These computers are used in the space program, nuclear weapons research, and defense systems, as well as for theoretical and researching purposes. And then we also have VME. It is a mainframe operating system developed by the UK company International Computers Limited. We also had RSX-11, and then RT-11, and we also had Alto OS. The Alto OS, also known as the Xerox Alto, is the first computer designed. It's the first computer designed from its inception to support an operating system based on a graphical user interface, or acronym for GUI or GUI. Later, using the desktop metaphor, the first machines were introduced on March 1973. And then during 1974, we had DOS-11, VO9-20C, and then Cintran 3. It was a real-time multitasking, multi-user operating system used with Norsk Data computers from 1974. We also had Monex. It was a computer operating system with basic COBOL, Fortran, Pascal interpreters, plus machine language facility. It was specifically designed for computer science education and as Australian secondary schools and at the university undergraduate level. We also had multi-programming executive. MPE. It was made by HP or Hewlett Packard. And then Hydra 8, Hydra. It's a capability-based multiprocessing OS kernel. And then we also had operating system virtual storage 2, R2. And then 1975, we had CP slash M. Also, it also originally standing for Control Program Monitor and later Control Program for Microcomputers. It is a mass market operating system created in 1974 for Intel 8080/85-based microcomputers by Gary Kildall of Digital Research Incorporated. And then we also had BS 2000 version 2.0. It was, it is a mainframe computer operating system developed in the 1970s by Siemens and from early 2000s onward by Fujitsu Technology Solution. And then we also had version 6 Unix, also called version 6 or just V6. And then during 1976, we had the Cambridge CAP computer. It was the first successful experimental computer that demonstrated the use of security capabilities both in hardware and software. It was developed at the University of Cambridge Computer Laboratory in the 1970s. We also had the Cray operating system, or COS, succeeded Chippewa operating system, and is Cray Research now discontinued proprietary operating system for its Cray 1 and Cray XMP supercomputers. We also had Flex. It is a single tasking operating system. It was developed by Technical Systems Consultants of West Lafayette, Indiana, for the Motorola 6800 in 1976. And then we also had TOPS-20 operating system by Digital Equipment Corporation. And then we had Tandem Nonstop OS version 1. It was intended for, it was intended ideally for ATM networks, banks, stock exchanges, and telephone switching centers, and other similar commercial transaction processing applications, requiring maximum uptime and zero data loss. And then 1977, we had OneBSD, or also called Berkeley Software Distribution. It was an operating system based on Research Unix, developed and distributed by the Computer Systems Research Group at the University of California. And then we had kernel, is Commodore's name for the ROM or ROM, Resident Operating System for in its 8-bit home computers from the original PET of 1977. And then we also had the Oasis operating system, Theos, which translates from Greek as God, is an operating system which started out as Oasis, a microcomputer operating system for small computers that use the 780 processor. And then we also had the TRS-DOS. It is the operating system for the Tandy TRS-80 line of 8-bit Zilog 780 microcomputers that were sold through Radio Shack from 1977 through 1991. And then we had Virtual Memory System, or VMS, version 1.0. And then during 1978, we had 2BSD. We also had Apple DOS. It is the family of these operating systems for the Apple II series of microcomputers from late 1978 through early 1983. It was then superseded by ProDOS in 1983. The Apple DOS has three major releases: DOS 3.1, DOS 3.2, and DOS 3.3. And then we also had HDOS. It is an early microcomputer operating system originally written for the HeatKit H8 computer system, and later also available for the HeatKit H89 and Zenith 789 computers. We also had Tripos. It is a computer operating system development. The development started in 1976 at the Computer Laboratory of Cambridge University, and it was headed by Dr. Martin Richards. We also had the UCSD P system. The P stands for Pascal. It is a Pascal programming language system that runs on the UCSD P system, a portable, highly machine-independent operating system. It was first released in 1977, and it was developed at the University of California. We also had the Lisp machine. Um, these are general-purpose computers designed to efficiently run Lisp as their main software and programming language, usually via hardware support. They are an example of a high-level language computer architecture. And then we had KVM 370. It's a security retrofit of IBM VM 370. We also had KSOS, a secure OS designed from Ford Aerospace. We also had MVS system extensions. And then during 1979, we had Atari DOS. It is the disk operating system used with the Atari 8-bit family of computers. Um, if you're familiar, if you're into consoles, it's one of the oldest, or not really old, yeah, one of the first type of consoles that were released. So operating system extensions loaded into the memory were required in order for an entire computer to manage files stored on a disk drive. So we also had POS, and then NLTSS, the Network Livermore Time Sharing System, also sometimes known as the New Livermore Time Sharing System. It was an operating system that was actively developed at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory until about from 1979 until about 1988. And then we had Unix 32B. It was an early version of the Unix operating system from Bell Laboratories. It was released in June 1979. And then we also had version 7 Unix, the 7th edition Unix. Or it can just be simply called just B7. It was an important early release of the Unix operating system. It was released in 1979. And yeah, pretty much that's it. And then we also had UCLA Secure Unix, and then MVS System Extensions R2. And then during so that's it for 1979. So moving to 1980s. So we had 86-DOS, and then we also had CTOS, or the Convergent Technologies Operating System, also known variously as CTOS, BTOS, and StarSys. It was a modular, message passing, multi-process based operating system. And then we also had NuDOS 80. It is a third-party operating system for the Radio Shack TRS-80 line of microcomputers, released in 1980. It was developed by Apparat Incorporated of Denver, Colorado. And then we also had OS 9, SOS, also called Sophisticated Operating System. It is the primary operating system developed for the Apple III computer. We also had MVS system product. and then Virtual Machine System product, and then Xenix. The Xenix is a discontinued version of the Unix operating system for various microcomputer platforms, licensed by Microsoft from AT&T Corporation in the late 1970s. And then during 1981, we had the Acorns machine operating system. It is a discontinued computer operating system used in the Acorn BBC computer range. It included support for 4-channel sound and graphics, file system abstraction, and digital and analog I/O, including a daisy-chained expansion bus. We also had CNU, the first release. It is an operating system for embedded systems, originally developed by Douglas Comer for educational use at Purdue University in the 1980s. And then we also have business operating system. It was initially developed as an early cross-platform operating system, originally produced for Intel 8080 and Motorola 6800 computers. And then we have AG's SR1. It was intended for the domain system, Apollo domain systems. And then we also had PC-DOS. It is an acronym for IBM Personal Computer Disk Operating System. So it is also intended for the IBM personal computer. And it was manufactured and sold by IBM from the early 1980s into the 2000s. And then we also had Pilot. It is a single-user multitasking operating system designed by Xerox PARC in early 1977. And then we also had MS-DOS. It is an operating system for x86-based personal computers, mostly developed by Microsoft. Collectively, MS-DOS, it's rebranding as IBM's PC-DOS, and some operating systems attempting to be compatible with MS-DOS. And then we also had UTS. It is a discontinued implementation of the Unix operating system for IBM mainframe computers. We also had IMAX, an OS for Intel's IAPX for 32 capability machine. And then during 1982, we had Commodore DOS, also known as CBM-DOS. It is this operating system used with Commodore's 8-bit computers. We also had LDOS, Biological Systems Incorporated, for the Radio Shack TRS-80 models 1, 2, and 3. And then we had QNX. It is a commercial Unix-like real-time operating system aimed primarily at the embedded systems market. The product was originally developed in the early 1980s by Canadian company Quantum Software Systems. And then we had Sun Unix, later called Sun OS. It is a Unix branded operating system developed by Sun Microsystems for their workstation and server computer system. We also had Ultrex. It is the brand name of Digital Equipment Corporation. Then we also, sorry for that one. So, and then we had Stratus VOS. It is a proprietary operating system running on Stratus Technologies fault-tolerant computer system. And then we also had Unix System 3. And then during 1983, we had the Lisa Office System. It was intended for the Lisa. I mean, it is a desktop computer developed by Apple, released on January 19, 1983. It is one of the first personal computers to offer a GUI or GUI and a machine aimed at individual business users. And then we also had Coherent. It is a clone of the Unix operating system for IBM PC compatibles and other microcomputers. And apologies for the background noise. It's we have a lot of dogs here at my place. And then going back, so we also had GNU. It is an operating system and an extensive collection of computer software. GNU is composed fully of free software, most of which is licensed under the GNU project's own general public license. We also had the Novel NetWare. It is a discontinued computer network operating system developed by Novel Incorporated. It, it initially used cooperative multitasking to run various services on a personal computer using the IPX network protocol. And then we also had ProDOS. It is the name of two similar operating systems for the Apple II series of personal computers. The original ProDOS renamed ProDOS 8 in version 1.2, and it is the last official operating system usable by all 8-bit Apple II series computers. Was distributed from 1983 to 1993. And then we also had SunOS 1.0. We also had Stop, and then Locus, Unix compatible, high reliability, distributed OS. We also had DNix. It was a Unix-like real-time operating system from the Swedish company, the Industrier AB. A version called AB Xenix was also developed for the ABC 1600 computer from Luxor. And then we also had MVS Extended Architecture. And then 1984, we had AMS-DOS. It is this operating system for the 8-bit Amstrad CPC computer. The name is an acronym of, it is an acronym of Amstrad Disk Operating System. And then we had the Mac OS System 1.0. So the classic Mac OS refers to the series of operating systems developed for the Macintosh family of personal computers by Apple Incorporated from 1984 to 2001, starting with System 1 and ending with Mac OS 9. And then we have MSX-DOS. It is a discontinued disk operating system developed by Microsoft for the 8-bit home computer standard MSX. We also had PCIX. And then Sinclair QDOS. It is the multitasking operating system found on the Sinclair QL personal computer and its clones. It was designed by Tony Tabby whilst working at Sinclair Research as an in-house alternative to 68K OS. And then we also had QNX, Unicos, Venix 2.0, and then the virtual machine extended architecture migration systems. And then during 1985, we had Windows 1.0. It is a graphical personal computer operating environment developed by Microsoft. Microsoft had worked with Apple Computer to develop applications for Apple's January 1984 original Macintosh. Uh, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it was created by Microsoft. Then we also had Amiga OS. It is a family of proprietary native operating systems of the Amiga and Amiga 1 personal computers. We also had the Atari TOS. It is the operating system of the Atari ST range of computers. And then we had DG UX. This is also a Unix operating system. And then MIPS RISC OS. This is normal. It was used for computer workstations and servers from 1985 to 1992. And then we had Oberon system. It is a modular, single-user, single-process, multitasking operating system written in the programming language of the same name. It was originally developed in the late 1980s at Zurich. And then we had the Sun OS 2.0. We also had the version 8 Unix during 1985. And then Windows 1.01. And then we also had Xenix 2.0. And then Virtual Machine Extended Architecture System Facility. And lastly, Graphics Environment Manager. It was an operating system created by Digital Research for use with the DOS operating system on Intel 88 and Motorola 68,000 microprocessors. And then 1986, we had the AIX 1.0. AIX is a series of proprietary Unix operating systems developed and sold by IBM for several of its computer platforms. Originally released for the IBM RT-PC workstation, AIX now supports or has supported a wide variety of hardware platforms. And then we had the GSOS or Apple II GS, the fifth and most powerful of the Apple II family. It is a 16-bit personal computer produced by Apple Computer Incorporated, while featuring the Macintosh look and feel and resolution and color similar to the Commodore Amiga and Atari ST. It remains compatible with earlier Apple II models. We also had Genera 7.0. This was developed for Lisp machines, and it was developed by Symbolics. And then we had the HP-UX. It is Hewlett Packard Enterprise's proprietary implementation of the Unix operating system based on Unix System 5 or V and first released in 1984. Recent versions support the HP 9000 series of computer systems. And then we also had the Sun OS 3.0. We also had GEOS or GEOS. It was also from Berkeley Softworks. And then we had the version 9 Unix. We also had the Gem SOS or Gem SOS and Kronos distributed OS. Then during 1987, we had Topaz. It is a semi-distributed OS for DC Firefly workstation, written in Modulo 2 Plus and Garbage Collected. We also had Arthur. It is a computer operating system originally designed by Acorn Computers in Cambridge, England. And we also had IRIX. It is the discontinued operating system developed by Silicon Graphics to run on the company's proprietary MIPS workstations and servers. And then we also had Minix. It's also a Unix-like operating system based on microkernel architecture. And then we had the BS 2000 v9.0 and then OS2 1.0. And then we also had the PC-MOS 386. And then lastly, Windows 2.0 was also released during 1987. It is a 16-bit Microsoft Windows GUI-based operating environment that was released around, on December 9, 1987, and it is the successor of Windows, to Windows 1.0. And in 1988, we had the AUX. It is a Unix-based operating system by Apple Computer, custom integrated with System 7's graphical interface and application compatibility. We also had the RISC IX, KeyCOS or KeyKOS. We also had Lynx OS, another Unix-like real-time operating system. And then CP/M was rebranded as DR-DOS. And then we had Mac OS System 6, MVS Enterprise Systems Architecture, and then we had the OS2 1.1, then OS 400, and then we had the Sparta DOS X, another operating system for the Atari 8-bit family of computers. And then Sun OS 4.0 was released as well. And then TOPS-10 7.04 was released. And then Helios 1.0 was released. The Helios is a discontinued Unix-like operating system for parallel computers. It was developed and published by Perihelion Software. Its primary architecture was the transputer. And then we also had the VAX VMM. That was intended for VAX computers. And then Flex Machine. The Flex computer system was developed by Michael Foster and Ian Curie of Royal Signals and Radar Establishment in England. And then lastly, the Virtual Machine Extended Architecture System product. And then 1989, we had Epoch. It is a mobile operating system developed by Psion, a British company founded in 1980. It began as a 16-bit operating system for Psion's own x86 compatible devices and was later replaced by a 32-bit system for x86 and ARM. And then we also had NextStep, another multitasking operating system based on Unix. Then OS2 1.2 was released. And then RISC OS. Then SCO Unix was released as well. It is a closed source computer operating system developed by Santa Cruz Operation. It was later acquired by SCO Group and now owned by Sinus. And then we had the TSX-32 and then the version 10 Unix. And CNIX 2.3.4 was also released during 1989. And lastly, ASOS. And then going to the 1990s, we had the Amiga OS 2.0, BOS. We also had the Genera 8.0, OS2 1.3, OSF 1, and then AIX 3.0, and we also had Windows 3.0, and then we had Lock, and then Virtual Machine Enterprise Systems Architecture, and TCGE OS. In the 1991, we had Linux 0.01-0.1. The Linux kernel is a free and open source monolithic Unix-like operating system kernel. The Linux family of operating systems is based on this kernel and deployed on both traditional computer systems such as personal computers and servers, usually in the form of Linux. And then Mac OS System 7 was also released. And we also had Minix 1.5 and then Penpoint OS. The Penpoint OS was a product of Go Corporation and was one of the earliest operating systems written specifically for graphical tablets and personal digital assistants. It ran on AT&T Corporation's EO personal communicator, as well as a number of Intel x86 powered tablet PCs. We also had the RISC OS 3, and then Trusted Xenix, and lastly Amoeba. The Amoeba is a distributed operating system developed by Andrew Tannenbaum and others at Amsterdam. The aim of the Amoeba project was to build a time-sharing system that makes an entire network of computers appear to the user as a single machine. Yeah, that makes sense. Just like an amoeba. In science. And then during 1992, we had the 386 BSD, the BSD 386, Amiga OS 3.0, Amiga Unix 2.01, RSTSE 10.1. We also had the SLS, also called as Soft Landing Linux System. And then we also had the Solaris 2.0. It is the successor to Sun OS 4.0. And then we had the OpenVMS. We also had the OS 2 2.0, and then the Plan 9 first edition. And we also had Windows 3.1 during 1992. And then LGX, Yggdrasil Linux, GNU, IX, or GNUX, or yeah, that's why it's called LGX. And then 1993 came, and we had FreeBSD. From the name itself, it's a free and open source Unix-like operating system descended from the Berkeley software distribution. We also had the NetBSD, another free and open source Unix-like operating system. And then Newton OS, it is the discontinued operating system for the Apple Newton PDAs, produced by Apple Computer Incorporated from 1993 to 1997. Newton OS was written entirely in C++ and trimmed to be low power consuming and use the available memory efficiently. And then we also had the Windows NT 3.1. It is the first Windows NT kernel public release. And it was released on July 27 of 1993. And then we had the OpenGenera 1.0. And we also had the IBM 4690 operating system. And we had the novel NetWare 4. And then OS 2 2.1. Then Slackware 1.0. And lastly, Spring for the 1993. And then during 1994, we had AIX 4.0 and 4.1, and then OS2 3.0, and then RISC OS 3.5. We also had the NetBSD 1.0. It is the first multi-platform release on October 1994. And then we also had Spin. The Spin operating system is a research project implemented in the computer programming language of Module 3. It is an open source project. We also had the Red Hat Linux during 1994. But then it was discontinued in 2004. And then 1995, we had Digital Unix, also known as True64 Unix. We also had OpenBSD, OS 390, and then Plan 9 second edition. We also had Ultrix 4.5. It's the last major release. And lastly, Windows 95. And then during 1996, we had Mac OS 7.6, Windows NT 4.0, and then Windows CE 1.0. The Windows CE is an operating system subfamily developed by Microsoft as part of its Windows Embedded family of products. We also had the RISC OS 3.6, AIX 4.2, OS2 4.0, and then Palm OS. Palm OS is a discontinued mobile operating system initially developed by Palm Incorporated for PDAs in 1986. Palm OS was designed for ease of use with a touchscreen-based graphical user interface. And then we also had the Debian 1.1, or I'm not sure if that's pronounced correctly, or Debian. And then JN, microkernel OS for embedded Java apps. And then 1997, we had Inferno. It is the distributed operating system started at Bell Labs and now developed and maintained by Vita Nova Holdings as a free software. Inferno was based on the experience gained with Plan 9 from Bell Labs. And then we also had Mac OS 8. It was released by Apple Computer Incorporated on July 26, 1997. And then we also had Windows CE 2.0, Sky OS. The Sky OS is a discontinued prototype commercial proprietary graphical desktop operating system written for the x86 computer architecture. As of January 30, 2009, development was halted with no plans to resume its development. And then we also had Minix 2.0, RISC OS 3.7, AIX 4.3, and then DR Web Spider 1.0. The DR Web Spider was a DOS web browser, mail client, and operating system environment developed by Caldera UK in 1997. It was based on the DR DOS operating system and networking components from Novell, as well as the Arachne web browser by Michael Pollack of XK Software. And then lastly, we had Nemesis. Nemesis. It is an operating system designed by the University of Cambridge, the University of Glasgow, the Swedish Institute of Computer Science, and Citrix Systems. Then going to 1998, we had Solaris 7, and then Windows 98. So it is the successor of successor to Windows 95, and it was released to retail on June 25, 1998. And just like its predecessor, it is a hybrid of 16-bit and 32-bit. And then we also had RT11 5.7, Novel NetWare 5, Junos. The Junos operating system uh, is used in Juniper Network's high-performance network devices, creates a responsive and trusted environment for accelerating the deployment of services and application for a single network. And then the DR is a Web Spider 2.0. And then during 1999, we had the AROS. Um, it's it's a research operating system, a free and open source multimedia-centric implementation of the Amiga OS 3.1. Designed to be portable and flexible, ports are currently available for x86 base and PowerPC base in native and hosted flavors with other architectures. We also had RISC OS 4 and then Mac OS 9 and then OS 2 4.5. And then we also had the Windows 98 second edition. And lastly, the second edition of Inferno. Now, for for the I mean for the year 2000, we had the ZOS. Um, it is a 64-bit operating system for IBM mainframes and produced by IBM. We also had the ZBM and then Windows 2000. The Windows 2000 was released to manufactured on December 15, 1999 and launched to retail on February 17, 2000. It is the successor to Windows NT 4.0. And then we also had Solaris 8. And then uh, on March 2000, we had the free BSD 4.0, Red Hat Linux 6.2e. We also had the Ateos and Beos R5. And then April 2000, we had Pocket PC 2000, originally codenamed Rapier. It was based on Windows CE 3.0. And then June 2000, we had the Windows CE 3.0, OpenBSD 2.7, Plan 9 3rd edition. And then July of 2000, we had the Windows 2000 Service Pack 1. And then August 2000, we had Debian 2.2, Morph OS 0.1. And then September, we had the Windows Millennium Edition, or Windows ME. We also had the Mac OS X public beta and the SUSE Linux 7.0. And then October, we had the ZOS Morph OS 0.2. And December of 2000, we had the NetBSD BSD 1.5 and then OpenBSD 2.8. And then Amiga OS 3.9 and HP-UX 11i. For the year 2001, we had the Morph OS 0.4, Mac OS X Cheetah version 10.0. We also had the Windows 2000 Service Pack 2, AIX 5L 5.1, OpenBSD 2.9, Ecom Station 1.0, Haiku. We also had Mac OS X Puma. And we had Pocket PC 2002, Windows XP was released on October 2001. and Windows XP 64-bit edition 2002 as well. And we also had Novel NetWare 6.0. And for December, we had OpenBSD 3.0 and OS2 4.52. And then for the year 2002, we had Red Hat Enterprise Linux 2.1 AS, SUSE Linux 8.0, and then Plan 9 4th edition. We also had OpenBSD 3.1, Solaris 9, and Debian 3.0, and then Syllable 0.4.0. And we also had Windows 2000 Service Pack 3, Mac OS X Jaguar version 10.2, and then Windows XP Service Pack 1. Then we also had NetBSD 1.6, AIX 5.2, and then OpenBSD 3.2, and then Morph OS 1.0, and lastly Morph OS 1.1 on December 2002. And then 2003, we had FreeBSD 5.0, Solaris 9, x86. We also had JNode, a successor of Java OS. And then Morph OS 1.2, React OS 0.1.0. And then we also had the 64-bit edition of the Windows XP. We also had the Morph OS 1.3. And on April 2003, we had the Windows Server 2003. And we had OpenBSD 3.3, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 2.1 ES, Windows 2000 Service Pack 4, Windows Mobile 2003, OpenVMS 8.0, Novel NetWare 6.5, Mark OS 1.4, HP-UX 11i V2, then Mac OS X Panther. We also had Red Hat Enterprise Linux 3, SUSE Linux 9.0, OpenBSD 9, BSD 3.4, and then Fedora Core 1, and then Linux 2.6.0 was released on December of 2003. And then 2004, we had the Linux 2.6.1 and React OS 0.2.0 for January 2004. And then February, we had the 2.6.2 and 2.6.3 Linux. And by March, we had the Linux 2.6.4 and then React OS 0.2.1. And then April, we had the Linux 2.6.5 and React OS 0.2.2. And then May, we had OpenBSD 3.5, Linux 2.6.6, and then Fedora Core 2. And then June, we had the React OS 0.2.3. July, we had the Dragonfly BSD 1.0. And then August, we had the Windows CE 5.x and Windows XP Service Pack 2. And then we also had the Linux 2.6.8, AIX 5.3. And then September, we had the React OS 0.2.4. Then October, we had Linux 2.6.9, Ubuntu 4.10. And then November, we had OpenBSD 3.6, Fedora Core 3. And then December of 2004, we had the NetBSD 2.0 and Linux 2.6.10. And then 2005 came. We had on January, we had the Solaris 10 and React OS 0.2.5. And then February, we had Red Hat Enterprise Linux 4, OpenVMS 8.2. And then March, we had the Windows Server 2003 Service Pack 1 and Windows XP Professional x64 edition. We also had the Linux 2.6.11 and novel Open Enterprise Server. We also had Morph OS 1.4.4. And then in April, we had the Mac OS X Tiger, Dragonfly BSD, and Ubuntu 5.04, and React OS 0.2.6, Morph OS 1.4.5. And then May, we had the Windows Mobile 5.0, the original code name Magneto. It was released at Microsoft's Mobile and Embed Developers Conference in Las Vegas. And then we also had OpenBSD 3.7. And then June of 2005, we had Linux 2.6.12, Fedora Core 4 by, yeah, it's also by Linux. And then Debian 3.1. And then August of 2005, we had Linux 2.6.13, and then React OS 0.2.7, and Morph OS 1.4.5 Classic. And then October 2005, we had Linux 2.6.14, Ubuntu 5.10, SUSE Linux 10.0, and then React OS 0.2.8. Then November, we had the FreeBSD 6.0 and OpenBSD 3.8. And then December of 2005, we had the NetBSD 3.0, and lastly, React OS 0.2.9. And then 2006 came. We had for January, we had Dragonfly BSD 1.4, and Linux 2.6.15, and Solaris 10. And then March, we had the Windows Server 2003 R2, and Linux 2.6.16, and Fedora Core 5. Then for May, we had the OpenBSD 3.9 and SymOS, and then Minix 3.1.2. And then June 2006, we had the Linux 2.6.17 and Ubuntu 6.06. So for Ubuntu, Ubuntu releases are made semi-annually by Canonical Ltd, the developers of the Ubuntu operating system, using the year and month of the release as a version number. The first Ubuntu release, for example, was Ubuntu 4.10 and was released on October 20, 2004. And then we also had Solaris 10. And then July, we had the Dragonfly BSD 1.6. For August, we had the BS 2000 OST version 7.0 and React OS 0.3.0. For September, we had the Windows CE 6.0 and Linux 2.6.18. Also had FreeDOS 1.0, OpenVMS 1.83, OpenVMS 8.3 rather. And then October 2006, we had Fedora Core 6, Ubuntu 6.10, Slackware 11.0. And then November of 2006, we had Windows Vista and OpenBSD 4.0, Linux 2.6.19, Amiga OS 4.0, Solaris 10, 11.06. And then year 2007, we had the Dragonfly BSD and Barat operating system solutions. We also had Windows Mobile 6.0, and then Linux 2.6.20, and then the Inferno 4th edition. And then March, we had the Windows Server 2003 Service Pack 2 and Red Hat Enterprise Linux 5, together with React OS 0.3.1. And then April, we had the Linux 2.6.21, Ubuntu 7.04, and Debian 4.0. Now for May of 2007, we had the iPhone OS 1 and OpenBSD 4.1 and Fedora 7. For July, for July, we had Linux 2.6.22 and Slackware 12.0. And then Dragonfly BSD 1.10 and Solaris 10 807. And then September of 2007, we had the iPhone OS 1.1 and then the HP-UX 11 IV3 and also React OS 0.3.3. October, we had the Mac OS X Leopard version 10.5, Linux 2.6.23, Ubuntu 7.10, and lastly, OpenVMS 8.3-1 H1. Then November, we had the Windows Home Server. It is a home server operating system from Microsoft, and it was announced on January 7 of 2007 at the Consumer Electronics Show by Bill Gates. But it was officially released on November 4 of 2007. Then we had OpenBSD 4.2, Fedora 8, and GOS or Good OS. It was an Ubuntu-based Linux distribution created by Good OS LLC. And then we also had the AIX 6.1. And then we also had the lastly for December 2007, we had the NetBSD 4.0. And then for 2008, we had the Linux 2.6.24, React OS 0.3.4, and for February 2008, we had this Windows Vista Service Pack 1 on Windows Server 2008. We also had the Dragonfly BSD 1.12 and FreeBSD 7.0. And then for March, we had the Singularity 1.1. Singularity is an experimental operating system which was built by Microsoft Research between 2003 and 2010. It was designed as a high dependability OS in which the kernel, device drivers, and application software were all written in managed code. For April 2008, we had the Windows Mobile 6.1 and Windows XP Service Pack 3. And then we had Linux 2.6.25 and Ubuntu 8.04. For May, we had OpenBSD 4.3, Fedora 9, Slackware 12.1, Solaris 10 508, Open Solaris 2008.05, BS 2000 OSD version 8.0A. And then June, we had the SUSE Linux 11.0, Morph OS 2.0, and React OS 0.3.5. And then July, we had the iPhone OS 2, and then Dragonfly BSD 2.0, and then Linux 2.6.26. And then August 2008, we had Stop 6.5 and React OS 0.3.6. Then September, we had the iPhone OS 2.1, Amiga OS 4.1, and ZOS V1 R10. Lastly, Morph OS 2.1. For October, we had Linux 2.6.27, Ubuntu 8.10, Android 1.0. We're pretty much aware of Android since most of us are using Android phones. And then Solaris 10.08 was released as well. OKL4 3.0, otherwise called as Open Kernel Labs. Then November 2008, iPhone OS 2.2 was released together with OpenBSD 4.4, Fedora 10, Singularity 2.0, React OS 0.3.7, and Gnode 8.11. And then for December, we had Linux 2.6.28, Slackware 12.2, Morph OS 2.2, Open Solaris 2008.11. And then during 2009, we started with Dragonfly BSD 2.2, Debian 5.0, and Android 1.1, together with React OS 0.3.8 during February of 2009. And then March, we had Linux 2.6.29. Then April, we had NetBSD 5.0, Ubuntu 9.04, Android 1.5, and React OS 0.3.9. And then May, we had the Windows Mobile 6.5, together with Windows Vista Service Pack 2. And OpenBSD 4.5, and Solaris 10 509. And then June, iPhone OS 3 was released, together with Linux 2.6.30, Fedora 11, Palm Web OS 1. WebOS, also known as LG WebOS, is previously known as Open WebOS, HP WebOS, and Palm WebOS. It is a Linux kernel-based multitasking operating system for smart devices such as smart TVs, and it has been used as a mobile operating system. And then we also had the Amiga OS 4.1, Open Solaris 2009.06. Then July, we had React OS 0.3.10, and then Mac OS X, Snow Leopard, and Slackware 13.0. And then Morph OS 2.3. Then we had iPhone OS 3.1, and then Dragonfly BSD 2.4, and then Linux 2.6.31, and then Android 1.6. And then October 2009, Windows 7 was released together with Windows Server 2008, Windows Server 2008 R2. And then OpenBSD 4.6, Ubuntu 9.10, Android 2.0, Solaris 10, 10.09, and then lastly Morph OS 2.4. And then November, we had FreeBSD 8.0, Fedora 12, and Open SUSE 11.2. Lastly, for December of 2009, we had Linux 2.6.32 and React OS 0.3.11. So for the year 2000, January, we started with Android 2.1 and Amiga OS 4.1, update 1. And then February, we had Linux 2.6.33. April, we had iPhone OS 3.2, Dragonfly BSD 2.6, Ubuntu 10.04, Amiga OS 4.1 update 2. And then May, we had OpenBSD 4.7, Linux 2.6.34, Fedora 13, Android 2.2. We also had iOS 4 during June, and then Morph OS 2.5 and VMS 8.4. And then July, we had OpenSUSE 11.3. August, we had Linux 2.6.35. And then September, we had iOS 4.1 and Solaris 10, 9/10, and then AIX 7.1. And then October, Windows Phone 7 was released. And then, yeah, I actually saw this one before, but I was not able to experience it firsthand, so I don't have any idea how it works. And then we had Dragonfly BSD 2.8, then Linux 2.6.36, Fedora 14, Ubuntu 10.10, and then Morph OS 2.6, React OS 0.3.12, and then November we had the iOS 4.2, and then NetBSD 5.1, and then OpenBSD 4.8, and Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6. And in December of 2000, we had Android 2.3 and Morph OS 2.7. And then year 2011, starting on January, on January, we had Linux 2.6.37, and then February we had Windows 7 Service Pack 1, and Debian 6.0, and Android 3.0. Then March, we had Windows CE 7.0 and iOS 4.3, together with Linux 2.6.38, OpenSUSE 11.4, and React OS 0.3.13. And then April, we had Windows Home Server 2011. It code named Veil. It is a home server operating system by Microsoft designed for small home offices, and homes with multiple connected PCs to offer protected file storage, file sharing, automated PC backup, remote access, and remote control of PC desktops. And then we also had Dragonfly BSD 2.10, Ubuntu 11.4, Slackware 13.37. And then May, we had OpenBSD 4.9, Linux 2.6.39, Fedora 15, Android 3.1, Amiga OS 4.1, Update 1 for Classic. And then June, we had iOS 5. And then we also had the Google Chrome OS and 9 font. And then July, we had Mac OS X Lion version 10.7, and then Linux 3.0, Android 3.2, HP Web OS 3, and lastly, Amiga OS 4.1 Update 3. And then September, we had Windows Phone 7.5. Then October, we had Linux 3.1, Ubuntu 11.10, and Android 4.0. And then November, we had OpenBSD 5.0, Fedora 16, OpenSUSE 12.1, and Solaris 11.11. Lastly, for December, we had Amiga OS 4.1 Update 4. And then year 2012, during January, we started with FreeBSD 9.0, Linux 3.2, and FreeDOS 1.1. FreeDOS is a free operating system for IBM PC-compatible computers. It intends to provide a complete DOS-compatible environment for running legacy software and supporting embedded systems. So, and then February, we had Dragonfly BSD 3.0, React OS 0.3.14, and Minix 3.2. And then March, we had the iOS 5.1, and then Linux 3.3, and Android 4.04. April, we had the Ubuntu 12.04. Then May, we had OpenBSD 5.1, and Linux 3.4, and Fedora 17. Lastly, DexOS. DexOS is a 32-bit operating system written in x86 assembly. It is designed for coders that want direct access to all hardware with well-commented code and documentation. It's licensed under a free-to-use license for commercial and non-commercial use. And then June, we had the BS2000 OSD 9.0. And then Morph OS 3.0. And then July, we had the OS X Mountain Lion version 10.8. And Linux 3.5, Android 4.1, OpenSUSE 12.2. And then Morph OS 3.1 and Amiga OS 4.1 Update 5. And then September came, we had the Windows Server 2012, iOS 6, Linux 3.6, Slackware 14.0, Cubes OS. Cubes OS is a security-focused desktop operating system that aims to provide security through isolation. Virtualization is performed by Xen, and user environments can be based on Fedora, Debian, Unix, and Microsoft Windows, among other operating systems. And then October 2012, we had, Windows 8 was released. together with Windows Phone 8. And then NetBSD 6.0, OpenBSD 5.2, Ubuntu 12.10, Solaris 11.1. Then November, we had the Dragonfly BSD 3.2, and Android 4.2, and Haiku R1 Alpha 4. Haiku is a free and open source operating system compatible with the now discontinued BOS. Its development began in 2001 and the operating system became self-hosting in 2008. Then lastly for December 2012, we had the free BSD 9.1. And then for January 2013, we started with iOS 6.1, followed by Fedora 18, and then followed by BlackBerry 10. BlackBerry 10 is a proprietary mobile operating system for the BlackBerry line of smartphones, both developed by BlackBerry Limited. BlackBerry 10 is based on QNX, a Unix-like operating system that was originally developed by QNX Software Systems. And then we also had Solaris 10, 1/13. And then March, we had the Open SUSE 12.3. April, we had the Dragonfly BSD 3.4, Linux, and then Linux 3.9, and Ubuntu 13.04. Then May, we had the NetBSD 6.1, and then OpenBSD 5.3. We also had the Debian 7.0 and React OS 0.3.15. And then we had the, where was I? Yeah, more OS 3.2. And then for June, we had the Windows CE 8.0 and Linux 3.10. And then July, we had Fedora 19 and Android 4.3. And then September, we had iOS 7, free BSD 9.2, Linux 3.11, Morph OS 3.3, and ZOS version 2.1. And then come October, Windows 8.1 was released together with Windows Server 2012 R2. We also had the OS X Mavericks version 10.9 and Ubuntu 13.10. And then November, we had the Dragonfly BSD 3.6, OpenBSD 5.4, Fedora 19, Slackware 14.1, OpenSUSE 13.1, Android 4.4, and Linux 3.12. And then for December 2013, we had the Fedora 20 and Morph OS 3.4, then the Muon separation kernel. And then for 2014, again, we had free BSD 10.0 and then Linux 3.13. Then February, we had the React OS 0.3.16 and then Morph OS 3.5. And then March, we had the iOS 7.1, followed by Linux 3.14. And then April, we had the Windows Phone 8.1, followed by Ubuntu 14.04, and then Solaris 11.2. And then May, we had the OpenBSD 5.5. And then June, we had the Dragonfly BSD 3.8, Linux 3.15, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7, Morph OS 3.6. And then August, we had the Linux 3.16, Morph OS 3.7. And then September, we had the iOS 8, followed by Minix 3.3. And then October, we had OS X Yosemite, and then iOS 8.1. We also had the Ubuntu 14.10 and Linux 3.17. And then November, we had the OpenBSD 5.6, FreeBSD 10.1, Dragonfly BSD 4.0. And then OpenSUSE 13.2, followed by Android 5.0, and React OS 0.3.17. Then lastly for December of 2014, we had the Linux 3.18. And then in the year 2015, we started with Linux 3.19 on February of 2015, then followed by iOS 8.2 on March of 2015, and then April we had the iOS 8.3, Watch OS 1. Watch OS is the operating system of the Apple Watch, um, developed by Apple Incorporated. Linux 4.0, Debian 8.0, Ubuntu 15.04, and Redux OS. The Redux is a Unix-like microkernel operating system written in the programming language Rust, a language with a strong focus on safety, stability, and high performance. Redux aims to be secure, usable, and free. And then May, we had the BS 2000 OST 10.0. Then June, we had the iOS 8.4, Linux 4.1, Morph OS 3.9. And then July of 2015, that's when we when Windows 10 1507 was released. And then August, we had the FreeBSD 10.2, Linux 4.2. Then September, we had the OS X El Capitan, iOS 9, Watch OS 2, NetBSD 7.0, ZOS version 2.2. And then October, we had the iOS 9.1, tvOS 9, Android 6.0, Ubuntu 15.10, AIX 7.2, Solaris 11.3. And then November, the Windows 10 November update 15.11. And then Windows 10 Mobile 15.11. So just a fun fact. It started with Windows 10. So if they have like a cumulative update, if you're gonna look at the numbers, what they use is the year when it was released and then the month. So just that's why it's saying 1511. And then we also had the tvOS 9.1, Linux 4.3, OpenSUSE, Leap 42.1. And then for December, we had iOS 9.2, Watch OS 2.1, and then tvOS 9.2. By the way, the tvOS is an operating system developed by Apple Incorporated for the fourth generation later Apple TV digital media player. I've not experienced that one since I don't have an Apple TV. I actually don't have any Apple device on hand, or have not. I haven't experienced any. I haven't tried using an Apple device. And then, so moving forward for the year 2016, January we had Linux 4.4 and Minix 3.4. Then February we had React OS 0.4. March we had iOS 9.3, Watch OS 2.2, and then tvOS 9.3. And then we had OpenBSD 5.9, FreeBSD 10.3, Linux 4.5. Then April, we had Ubuntu 16.04, Rack OS 0.4.1, and then May, we had Linux 4.6. June, we had Slackware 14.2. And then Fedora 24, Linux Mint 18. And then August 2016, we had the Windows 10 anniversary update 16.07. Then Windows 10 Mobile anniversary update 16.07. And Dragonfly BSD 4.6, Android 7.0, Rack OS 0.4.2. Then September of 2016, we had the Windows Server 2016, and then Mac OS Sierra, iOS 10, Watch OS 3, tvOS 10, OpenBSD 6.0, and Linux 4.8. And then October, we had iOS 10.1, and then Watch OS 3.1, followed by NetBSD 7.0.2, and FreeBSD 11.0, together with Android 7.1 and Ubuntu 16.10. And then November, we had Oracle Linux 7.3. Oracle Linux is a Linux distribution package and freely distributed by Oracle, available partially under the GNU General Public License since late 2006. It is compiled from Red Hat Enterprise Linux source code, replacing Red Hat branding with Oracle's. Fedora 25, OpenSUSE Leap 42.2, and React OS 0.4.3. Then December of 2016, we had iOS 10.2, tvOS 10.1, Linux 4.9, Linux Mint 18.1, and FreeDOS 1.2. Then year 2017 came. We started with February of 2017. We had Linux 4.10 and React OS 0.4.4. During March, we had iOS 10.3, Watch OS 3.2, tvOS 10.2, Dragonfly BSD 4.8, NetBSD 7.1. And then April, we had Windows 10 Creators Update 1703, Windows 10 Mobile Creators Update 1703. We also had OpenBSD 6.1, Linux 4.11, and Ubuntu 17.04. In May, we had the React OS 0.4.5. For June, we had Debian 9.0 and Fedora 26. For July, we had Linux 4.12 and OpenSUSE Leap 42.3, together with BS2000 OSD 11.0. And then August, we had the Android 8.0. For September, we had Mac OS High Sierra, iOS 11, Watch OS 4, and tvOS 11. And we also had Linux 4.13 and React OS 0.4.6. Then October, we had Windows 10 Fall Creators Update 1709, Windows 10 Mobile Fall Creators Update, Windows Server 2016 Fall Creators Update. And then we also had iOS 11.1, Watch OS 4.1, tvOS 11.1, OpenBSD 6.2, Dragonfly BSD 5.0, and Ubuntu 17.10. For November, we had Linux 4.14 and Fedora 27. Lastly, for December of 2017, we had iOS 11.2, WatchOS 4.2, tvOS 11.2, Android 8.1, and React OS 0.4.7. And then for the year 2018, we started with Linux 4.15 the month of January. Then the month of March, we had iOS 11.3, WatchOS 4.3, tvOS 11.3, NetBSD 7.1.2, and Gnode Scope EA. Gnode is a free and open source operating system framework consisting of a microkernel abstraction layer and a collection of user space components. The framework is notable as one of the few open source operating systems not derived from a proprietary OS such as Unix. And then April 2018, we had Windows 10, April 2018 update, OpenBSD 6.3, Dragonfly BSD 5.2, Linux 4.16, Ubuntu 18.04, Rack OS 0.4.8. And then May, we had iOS 11.4, tvOS 11.4, Fedora 28, OpenSUSE Leap 15.0. For June, we had Linux 4.17, Gnode Scope TC. And then July, we had NetBSD 8.0, SUSE Linux Enterprise 15, and React OS 0.4.9. And then for August, we had the NetBSD 7.2, together with Linux 4.18 and Android 9.0. And then September, we had Mac OS Mojave or Mojave. And then iOS 12, Watch OS 5, tvOS 12. Lastly, Gnode Scope VC. And in October, we had the Windows 10 October 2018 update, 1809, and Windows Server 2019, 1809. By the way, Windows Server 2019 is the latest version of the server operating system by Microsoft. And then iOS 12.1, we also had watchOS 5.1, tvOS 12.1, and OpenBSD 6.4. And then Linux 4.19, Ubuntu 18.10, then Fedora 29. Then for November, we had React OS 0.4.10. And for December, we had Dragonfly BSD 5.4, FreeBSD 12.0, and Linux 4.20. Now for the year 2019, we started around March. We had iOS 12.2, watchOS 5.2, tvOS 12.2, Linux 5.0, React OS 0.4.11. Then around April, we had Ubuntu 19.04, Fedora 30. Then for May, we had the Windows 10 May 2019 update, iOS 12.3, tvOS 12.3, OpenBSD 6.5, NetBSD 8.1. And then we also had Linux 5.1, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8, OpenSUSE Leap 15.1. Then June, we had Dragonfly BSD 5.6 and SUSE Linux Enterprise 15 SP1 or Service Pack 1. And then July, we had iOS 12.4, watchOS 5.3, tvOS 12.4, Debian 10.0, Linux 5.2. September, we had iOS 13, iOS 13.1, watchOS 6, iPadOS 13.1, tvOS 13, Linux 5.3, Android 10.0, Rack OS 0.4.12, and then October, we had Mac OS Catalina version 10.15, Ubuntu 19.10, Fedora 31. And then November of 2019, Windows 10 November 2019 update will be released. And then we still don't have anything for December 2019 and moving forward. So if you're gonna look at it, we get constant updates, new releases or different patches or updates for the existing operating systems. So yeah, this will be. I mean, the list will be very long, and I'm not sure when will it end, but yeah. For the other, for the things that I mentioned, I'm really not familiar with them. The most that I've encountered or I've used is mostly Windows, and the oldest that I've used is I think Windows XP. But right now I'm using Windows 10 for work, and then Windows 7 for my own computer at home. So pretty much that's it. Thank you for listening, and that's it for me. Thank you.